This conference will now be recorded.
Good afternoon, everyone. We are thrilled that all of you are with us today. We'd like to welcome you to the Greene County Technical Assistance Workshop for our ARPA, American Rescue Plan Act, nonprofit funding. My name is Lyle Foster. I'm working here as a grant and equity specialist as part of the ARPA team at Greene County. And with me,
Hello, everyone. My name is Skylar Crawford. I am part of the Greene County ARPA team.
Hi, everyone. My name is Mark Means. I, too, am an ARPA intern and a senior at Missouri State this
yeah. And again, I know this was a short notice. We have had a lot of different things we wanted to get in place before we began our workshop, and we kind of made an internal decision that as soon as we announced it, we would at least get our first workshop session in. There will also be another workshop session next week, and there'll be additional opportunities for technical assistance. But we felt that the best option would probably be as soon as we began the application window being open, that we would immediately provide some technical assistance so that we could answer your questions and tell you about the application process. If everybody can mute themselves, that's also going to help us. And we're going to go to an agenda. We have kind of a robust time plan, but we also recognize all of you have very busy schedules. So we'll make sure as well that we don't take too long, but we also want to respond to what your needs may be today as well. So I'd like to just ask a few of you to introduce yourselves and let us know who's on the call, please. So I know when it's all of these different folks on at once, it's kind of awkward to try to do that. I would actually want to have everybody's face
cameras up top.
at the top, if you don't mind.
Go to the right there, cameras. Nope, take camera. Just to the right. Nope, to the right. Nope, to the right. There you go.
There we go. So if any of you mind introducing, can you put it, maximize? Whoever would like to introduce themselves and just tell us how you're doing today, feel free. We want this to be informal as well as informative. Anybody want to say hi, where you're from? I know a lot of screens are off. Thank you.
Hi.
Anybody else?
Hi, everyone. Jamie Fields with Lost and Found Grief Center, also joined by Tiffany Ingram on our team. Good to see everybody.
Right.
Thank
Hey,
you.
everyone. Amy
Lorraine
Jardell
Hughes with the Senior Age Area Agency on Aging.
Thank you.
Tessa Mills with the Missouri Institute of Natural Science.
Thank you.
Holly Melton with the Drew Lewis Foundation.
Thank you, Holly.
Ron Sanders, Veterans in Greene County.
Thank you, Ron.
Debbie Parks, Ozarks Transportation Organization.
Thank you.
Hi. Amy Jardell with Ozark Literacy Council.
Okay.
Laura Farmer from CASA of Southwest Missouri.
Hi, Laura.
Lisa Strader, Good Dads.
Okay.
Bridget Barclay-Sudol with Habitat for Humanity.
Thank you.
Kimberly LeBon Nash with United Way.
Great.
Michelle Garand with Community Partnership of the Ozarks.
Hi, Michelle.
Hi.
Hello, Malia. Go ahead. Vicki Dudley with Isabel's House.
Thank you.
Malia Spencer with The Kitchen Inc.
Hi, Malia. Okay, well, I appreciate that. Go ahead, sir.
Jeff Steele and Samantha Sturry with the Gilroy Center for Arts and Entertainment. Thanks, Lyle.
Okay, good to see you. I know it's a little awkward on this kind of format for everybody to introduce themselves, but I just want to make sure this is, Springfield, Greene County. We're very informal. We have an opportunity to say hi to everybody this afternoon. So we're going to start our screen sharing. Can everybody hear me okay? If somebody can just put in the chat, if you can hear me okay, I would appreciate that. So we know that the audio is working adequately before I start really talking a lot. So just let me know if you can hear me okay. I would appreciate that. Yes, thank you so much. I appreciate that. I want to start off by saying thank you to everybody for what you do. in our community. I hope everybody realizes that at Greene County, the Greene County Commission really appreciates your hard work. And I know the last few years have been very, very challenging ones. I'm sure for many of you, the things you've experienced is very difficult to put into words or on an application. So please know that we try to understand that, and we hope that what we can share today is an opportunity for you to respond to the concerns and needs of the community, largely impacted because of the COVID-19 pandemic and our continuing efforts for community and economic recovery. If anybody is not muted, please do. Otherwise, there might be just some feedback on our end. Just so that you know, we will have this recorded, of course, and we will make the workshop available on the Greene County website. So feel free to take notes if you need to, but all of this will be available on the website for you as soon as we can get it up. So again, just welcome, and we want to go to some of our overview. And some of you are aware of some of this background data, but there may be some of you who are not. So we want to make sure that everybody is a part of this and understands what we're sharing this afternoon. So this is our first workshop. There will be a second workshop next Wednesday at 3 o'clock. It'll be the same material. And might be a few questions that'll come up in the first week that we'll also be addressing. But again, and you're welcome, of course, to join with us again next Wednesday as well if you'd like to do that. In addition, there'll be technical assistance available with the ARPA team. We have some other team members as well that are not part of the workshop this afternoon. So Monday through Thursday, you're encouraged to just contact the ARPA team between 10 a.m. to noon, other times by appointment. And our phone number as well as the email is listed for your convenience. So feel free to call if you have a question. We would rather you call even if it seems to be a very minor or basic question so we can have clarification rather than perhaps make a mistake or just do something that you find should have been done differently later on. So we want to be available and accessible to all. So again, the Greene County Commissioners are certainly very supportive of your work in the community, and they'd like to also be part of the welcome process this afternoon. And I believe there are probably some Greene County staff that are on the call this afternoon. We want to welcome them and thank them for their hard work on the ARPA program. So I think all of you are familiar with our commissioners, but we want to give a shout out to each of them this afternoon. And this is kind of the full Greene County ARPA team. Chris Coulter, our county administrator. Jeff Scott, Greene County budget officer. Many of you are aware of him rather than have worked with him on the ERA program. Cindy Stein, our amazing Greene County auditor. Justin Hill, the very capable Greene County treasurer. Then Dave Kavanagh in our IS department. Robert, Jenny, Skylar, Mark, and Karen, all part of the ARPA and PIO team here at Greene County. We also have a Greene County ARPA Advisory Council. There is a link under the Greene County ARPA tab that talks about the role of the Advisory Council. Many of you were funded through the CARES program, so you're familiar with us having an Advisory Council. Our commission has felt this was a very important component of our pandemic relief efforts, having a Community Advisory Council that in fact represents kind of the eyes and ears, if you will, in our community to see what's going on, not only with our small business program, but also in terms of our nonprofit initiative. So some of you may recognize some of these names, and they have been working very hard in some of the planning and implementation of these programs as well. Currently, they're meeting every 2 weeks, and they will also be part of the review process for the nonprofit application program. So I wanted you to just be aware of who they are and thank them for their work in the community if you see and know them. Quick few things about background. We're very familiar with the ARPA program on a national or federal level. I think most of us know that Greene County received almost $57 million as a direct recipient of ARPA funds. The first half of that allocation came in May of 2021, and we received the second half of that allocation at the beginning of the summer. So if ever there are questions, do they have the money? Do they get the money? Yes, we have the money, and we have begun to start spending the money. But obviously there's a lot of planning and work that has to be done to make sure we have the proper controls in place before the money is actually distributed. So we're at that point now. I think you all know we had a community impact program earlier this summer. We've been very actively involved in our small business program, and now we've moved to the nonprofit program, which is what is starting today, and we'll go through. Thank you. So again, a few things that are actually part of the background for the nonprofit program as well. Many of you know that we did a community survey last year. That community survey is actually on our website as well under the Greene County ARPA tab. When we go there this afternoon, you'll see that needs assessment. Hopefully if you've read it. If you haven't, I would certainly reference it because it actually helps to inform the application process for the nonprofit application. One component of the needs assessment were nonprofit listening sessions. Some of you that are on the call this afternoon were actually in those listening sessions. Thank you again for being a part of that. We took what you said and incorporated it in the needs assessment, and we also tried to use some of that in our program design for the nonprofit application. We are aware as our county continues to grow and diversify, it's important that these unique needs of our citizens are recognized and addressed. So you'll see even in the application process, we are looking for initiatives that recognize the continued growth and changes within our community and how these populations are being addressed with our programs and services. We are very aware locally as well as nationally that the COVID-19 pandemic exacerbated some of the disparities between different racial, ethnic, age groups, and income groups. And so it is important, and it's written into the legislation, how in fact we help to address those disparities with our programs and services. And I think the last statement is fairly self-explanatory. We are monitoring the chat, so if you have something that you want to comment or ask a question on as we go, feel free to put that in the chat and we'll double check as we go through. These are just for, again, background references, the top priorities that came out of the needs assessment process. In the needs assessment, you can actually see this by the city of Springfield and the balance of Greene County. We also have the data by several of our larger suburban communities, and you can see how these things rank from community to community. Because interestingly enough, you see, for example, water and sewer and broadband, which are issues out in the county, but not necessarily in the city of Springfield. And then we have an asterisk that there are some actual special state initiatives that are addressing those particular categories. So we're not necessarily expecting any of our nonprofit applications to be specifically addressing broadband, for example.
I have a question. You said I could ask a question?
Yes, I did.
Yeah, is it your intent to exclude veterans groups? It seems like that's what the plan has been in the past. Why is it that you're not including American Legion, VFW, and vets in this? You seem to exclude our 501c19 groups, and it seems to be a past practice. Is that your intent, or is that unintentional?
Thank you for that question. That's a very important question. We do plan to address that today. So what I want to say to everybody on the call is that when we list that you have to be a 501c3, that is obviously kind of what I would describe as a sweet spot for the application process in terms of the IRS designation. It is not our intent to exclude other types of 501c organizations. So we can certainly talk offline, but what I would say, we're looking at other types of designation on a case-by-case basis. I think on the call recognize there are a number of different types of C6, C9, there are many different designations under the 501 categories. And we want to make sure that your particular category is in compliance. But I believe, if I remember correctly, with the CARES program, that there were some veterans organizations and American Legion organizations that were funded with CARES. So please do not take this as a blanket no for organizations that are not 501c3. What we're saying in today's call is that we want to look at your particular designation individually to make the correct determination, because everything that we do, sir, must be in compliance with federal guidelines. So we don't have the option of making up a lot of these decisions as a county. We have to do what's in compliance with the actual federal legislation. But I think our goal is, if you have a 501c designation and we see that that's eligible, we'll certainly invite you to submit an application. So hopefully that answers.
So what will be the next step as far as the 501c19 is concerned in contacting you? How does that work?
Okay, the information we showed on the previous slide, to call our office or email I think you actually phoned us today, so we have your information. But when we get a final determination, I would just say today, feel free to submit an application and consider yourself, invited as part of the application process. Okay?
Thank you. I appreciate your response.
No worries. Thank you for asking. I appreciate it. So this is just kind of a summary of how the funds were initially awarded through the Greene County allocation process. So just very quickly, that's the $57 million approximately. And I think I want to just really point out, and this is a new process to me. I'm just being transparent. But I want to just say to our nonprofit community, the Greene County Commission, I think, has been very extremely forward thinking in terms of how they wanted to see these funds go back out into the community. So you look at about 40% of this total allocation is going out in terms of small business and nonprofit funding, and another 40% is going out essentially with that CIP, the Community Impact Program. And then 20% is going towards county, municipal, first responder projects. Just so you're aware, I think if you read about ARPA, in many parts of the nation, cities, counties, people have taken many of the dollars and utilized that on what I might call their own projects, and they're eligible to do that as part of the legislation. But the Greene County Commission has been very intentional about wanting these dollars to primarily, and you can see by those numbers, just about all go out into the community. There have been needs that Greene County will be utilizing some funds for, but I would say in terms of the total allocation, a very limited number of dollars. So that's why we're able to do the nonprofit program. That's why we're able to do the small business program. And I can say that as somebody that may be a little bit more objective because this was not required. So when they decided to do a nonprofit program, this was because they see and know what you do, and they're responding to the needs of our community. So I just felt it was important to share that for you this afternoon. All right, now we're getting a little bit into the nitty gritty, and I'm going to ask you to just please be patient with us. We spent a lot of energy and time coming up with this. I know when it comes to, I've been on the side that you've been on, writing grants, et cetera. I worked in nonprofits for decades. So I know it doesn't always hit all the buttons and bells you want it to hit, but we've done our best to try to be fair, to try to be objective, and to look at our past experience with the CARES program. So out of the nonprofit allocation, we're looking at 2 rounds of nonprofit funding. 1 round in the fall of 2022, which is what we're starting today, and then a second round, which will take place in 2023. The funding round for this fall, as you can see, is approximately $5.9 million. So that's what's available and set aside by the commission for us to distribute this fall. Now, this is something that I want to just introduce you to. We're looking at 3 funding tiers. Quick background, the Community Impact Program, those were our large transformational projects. And I think a few of you on the call actually received recommendations in that program. So those were grants over $500,000. So by default, the nonprofit funding program for the rest of the community is starting at grants under $500,000. But we have divided that into 3 application categories: Tier 1, Tier 2, and Tier 3. So grant awards between $250,000 and $500,000 were our largest tier, which we're calling Tier 1. Middle tier, grants between $50,000 and $250,000. Tier 2, our lowest tier, grant awards between $1 and $49,999. Now, our determination has been to be competitive and hopefully to be fair. Each grant application will compete against the ones in its tier. So if your agency budget and therefore your grant award is going to be between $50,000 and $250,000, your grant application will be considered between like-sized organizations. And we felt like that was a more equitable way to address that. We also are using a criteria. This is not completely in stone, but it's pretty firm. Applicants are encouraged to apply for a grant amount no more than 20% of their operating budget. This is just to kind of give you parity where you're not applying for, I'm trying to think the kind way to say is maybe a greater opportunity than maybe you have the capacity or the experience, because we want to make sure that we can also get some of the smaller organizations supported that are hitting those very unique pockets within our community. So And we have a formula in the application that, in the user guide that shows that. And then the amount available, which is what I just went over for each funding tier, will be determined in the review process. And then all grants will be made on a reimbursement basis. So we recognize that in some cases, depending on your grant's cash flow, that may be more or less challenging. We will, whenever we can, if you have actually spent something in that category already that you are funded for, we will, as part of the grant agreement, allow you to submit those receipts and get reimbursed as soon as possible. But we want to make sure that everybody understands at this point, the grants are being made on a reimbursement basis. I think we're just about ready to go into some of the nitty gritty pretty soon. And yes, if the full amount isn't approved, partial awards will be made. So yes, thank you for this great question. Thank you. Okay, I think people are also aware of this, but we just wanted to make sure we put that out there because our commission and our personnel here at the county are committed to this, making sure that there's an ARPA equity lens considered in the application process, and want to make sure that you understand what that means. And so it means that we want to make sure those pockets that have had really difficult challenges in terms of racial, ethnic, and socioeconomic lines, that there are attempts and efforts to address those pockets within our community. I think it's very abundantly clear some of the challenges in our Greene County community that have come up in terms of the COVID-19 pandemic. And those of you who are housed in and working in low-income communities, in particular, there is going to be that consideration in terms of that's a priority that we're looking at. So we want to make sure that you recognize that. And we're also saying this because please tell us that in the application. Okay. We're almost getting ready to go into the actual homepage. So Skylar Crawford is going to take this section assisted by Mark Meeks. Thank you.
Hello, everyone. Skylar here. I just wanted to make sure and that everyone completing the application really, I guess, knows where they're going. That's pretty important, it might seem. So to start here, there's just a couple of options to get to our application, and I just kind of wanted to point some of these out. The second option here is a link that goes directly to our portal. But we know that we have resources that may help you complete the application. And so I kind of wanted to, step by step, show you how to get to those resources. So I'm going to go ahead and go to our main page at greenecountymo.gov. And as you can see, we've pulled up to our main page here. And just by scrolling down a little bit, you can see our tabs start to show up. And what you're going to be looking for here is the orange American Rescue Plan Act tab. So I'm going to click on that. You can see a lot drops down here. Some of our previous programs, and there's just some general information about the American Rescue Plan Act. But what we're looking for here is nonprofit application, and you can kind of see that just down the drop down here. And the first thing I want to point out is nonprofit application criteria. So let's just go ahead and click on that. All right. So this document is obviously pretty important for you guys to see. I think this is important for you guys to take a look, read over just before you even start the application, to make sure there isn't any deal breakers in here. We don't want you guys to get halfway through the application and realize, maybe you're not eligible and maybe don't fit the criteria. So this is, of course, an important document to look over. Dr. Foster, I don't know, is there any items on here that you think are important to address at this moment?
I don't think so, Skylar. I would just emphasize again, we are inviting other forms of 501c applications to apply. So we know what the language is saying, but at this point, feel free to submit an application if you're in a different category.
All right, so we'll go back to that tab, back to where we were. And the second document I kind of want to look over here is the nonprofit application user guide. And this will be especially helpful for when you guys are, when you guys are going through the application, this document provides some insight into really what each question is asking, maybe the purpose of it, and maybe can provide you some more clarity to each question. The first thing on this document is just a little a description on kind of where you go to exactly to get to the application. Of course, that's what I'm doing now, but in case you want to refresh yourself, that's kind of what the beginning of this page is. And kind of the details on what you're going to do when you get there. Of course, you're going to want to register. That's the first thing you do once you get to the portal. I'll go over that. We'll go over that here in a little bit. Just an example here of what kind of insight this document provides. You can see here, this is just kind of general contact information for the application, but this is kind of a little bit more insight to what this document provides. Maybe gives you more an idea of what we're asking. We can go down to section 5 of our application. Touches on something we touched on a little bit before, Dr. Foster did, but just kind of hits home this tier idea, so that'll be also something to consider here. And Dr. Foster, is there anything else you wanted to touch on?
This is just, thank you, Scott. This is just to make sure you have clarification in terms of what do you mean by the 20%. So if your operating budget, and we did have some research from one of our advisory council members just in terms of pretty much looking at what is the distribution in terms of agency size in Greene County. So we kind of have a sense of that. We also know from the CARES application nonprofit process how many of our organizations that applied as well as received funding, where they are from what I would call a size distribution. So it's not as many organizations as you think that would be in the largest tier, and it kind of breaks down, where there's a little bit more in the middle and quite a few in the lowest tier. But this gives you a sense of where you would be as an agency budget. A few people have already gotten wind of this and have called and asked. We're looking at what your agency total budget is, not what a specific program budget is. So that's what I would invite you to be considering. So if your budget is their operating budget of $250,000 to $1.25 million, that corresponds to the 20% grant ask request based on, that formula. So if your operating budget is essentially, $250,000, you'd be applying for $50,000. So I would just kind of caution you, because you fit in that middle tier. If your budget is $300,000, you wouldn't be applying for $250,000. You would be applying for $60,000. So, in terms of that answer, partial awards will be made. In fact, there probably will be a lot of partial awards. Don't quote me, but yeah, partial awards will be made. And this will be something between our internal team and the advisory council. So yes, thank you for that question again. That's fine. Skylar?
All right, and now what you guys, I'm sure, have been waiting for, we'll actually get to the application itself. So we are back at the American Rescue Plan Act tab, and you're going to want to click on nonprofit application. It is not just a header, it is an actual link, and so that's what you're going to be looking for here. All right, and so this is the first page, kind of intro page to our application portal. And, this is kind of more information that you may have seen on the previous documents, but nonetheless valuable information. But what we're going to be looking for here is to register your account. So I'll go ahead and pass this over to Mark.
Hello everyone, let me get this swapped over real quick. So like Skylar described, this is the home page of the ARPA nonprofit application. This is where when you first load up the document, you will create your account so you can begin the application. If you do not have an account, you will start first by clicking on register. and this will bring up some generic contact information that we will use whenever you begin the application. And if there's any follow-up, we will continue to use the emails provided to make sure that we're completely transparent throughout the process. This information is relatively simple. Feel free to provide it at your leisure, and then when that's created, it will take you to your account profile. I previously created an account to make sure that the test site works, so I'll enter this information now. If you join back into the website, say you start, save, and want to return, you will sign in like I'm doing right now. Then click sign in, and it should, I got one step ahead of myself there, it'll bring you to this page where it will detail your applications. You can see I have 2 right now. I've been testing the site to make sure all the kinks are worked out. For you, it will say submit or create new, something along those lines to suggest that this is where you want to start now. Create new application right there. You'll click start, and then it'll take you to the actual application. There are several sections of the application, and we can work through each one. And if you have any questions, feel free to add those to the chat. We'll try to monitor those the best we can. The first section is qualifying criteria. These will look, like Skylar mentioned, very similar to the other language you've seen in the other documents we've provided. These are essentially our 4 core criteria. Likely your organization will be able to meet all 4 of these criteria, so you'll read through and select all 4. Yeah, so that's a good point. The date here says March 3rd, 2020. This is incorrect. The true date is March 3rd, 2021. We're working on that right now to get that updated. So that should be updated in this afternoon or early next morning. So just to keep that in mind. When those 4 criteria are selected, you'll click Save and Continue, and that'll move to the next section. This is a little different than the sign-in information you provided. This is for your organization. So we'll provide the pertinent information that's requested in each question, working line by line to make sure all the information is correctly typed and spelled so that we know what organization you're representing, what contact information we need to use whenever we are messaging you, and here website or Facebook page address in case we have any confirmation questions about the active nature of your organization. We might reference those sources later on. For organization operating address, similarly, you'll want an address where the primary meat and potatoes of your organization is currently going on right now. Work through those answers normally. And here, this is one of the big questions, description of general agency or organization. We want to know what types of services your organization provides. Any question where there's a free response option, you're limited to 500 words. We think that most of these questions can be succinctly addressed in 500 words. Try to be as clear as possible. If you do have anything that needs to be described beyond 500 words, we can surely take that in an email. But for the point of the application, we think most questions could be properly addressed within 500 words or less. So you'll work through each question, answering to the best of your ability, keeping in mind all the qualifying criteria that we presented at the front of the application. Here it asks the location of your organization. So likely for many of us, we'll select yes. And then depending on whether or not we have different satellite organizations located outside of Greene County, you'll select yes or no. Here, similar questions, standard details about your organization. Here, this is an important question, providing one of the following: DUNS number, taxpayer identification number, or UEI. If your organization has a UEI, which means you have some sort of account registered through sam.gov, we prefer that number for our reporting purposes at the end of the project. Here are similar questions that should be fairly simple to address with the information provided in your organization, number of employees, and then point of contact. This would be a representative within your organization who we'd be able to have future correspondence with should we have any questions that we need to address for our review purpose. Like section 1, you would click Save and Continue and move down to section 3. And this is about your employee demographic information. Now, like it says here in this info box, this section is optional. It is not required to be considered for a grant. Rather, this is information that we think might be pertinent to ensure that we are in accordance with the equity component of the U.S. Treasury. If you do choose to answer, you would work through these questions, providing percentages for the different racial categories of your employees, and then the different gender categories of your employees. Theoretically, these numbers will add up to 100%. If you choose not to answer, you can go back up to the top and click Prefer Not to Answer, and it will take you to Section 4 without any penalty. Section 4 asks very similar questions, except this section is required. The questions will look identical to what's provided in the employee demographic information. This time we're looking to see who you serve as an organization. Similarly, we ask that these percentages add up to 100%. If you aren't sure, there's a section here to click Unsure or Prefer Not to Say. Work through these questions as you normally would to the best of your ability, providing numbers that you believe reflect the clientele of your organization. This first question is the racial categories, and the second are the gender categories. When those are completed, you would click Save and Continue. Section 5 is Application Overview, and this perhaps is the most important section that we want to make sure we clarify in today's meeting. Like Skylar and Dr. Foster described, the funding tiers for the project proposal will help structure the need and the ask for your project proposal. The language is very similar to what you've already seen. We strongly encourage, once again, that your funding request does not exceed 20% of your organization budget. And we've broken down your budgets right here to give you some sort of guidance on where we think your grant proposal should align with.
Mark, can I speak to one of those?
Absolutely.
I want to just give a little bit of clarification. Some of you are probably looking at that statement about organizations in Tier 3 will be considered for a 2-year funding cycle. I'll just be very transparent. We had a lot of conversation around this particular issue. So the question or the concern might be if an agency that maybe is one of these very important organizations serving a unique pocket in the community. So we recognize that if we are utilizing this 20% formula to the letter, you might have this organization could conceivably have a $20,000 budget. So we're basically saying you can only get $4,000 to address what might be a very viable need in the community. So we wanted to have some built-in flexibility if we see some situations where they're doing something very important that's really hitting. I mean, I'll just give an example. Maybe it's immigrant community to our community, or somebody who's been a very frail section of our population that's been particularly harmed by the pandemic. And we recognize that they could probably continue this more if they knew they had a larger funding allocation. So I just wanted to explain, this was an attempt to maybe recognize there can be some unique situations that we didn't want to put ourselves in a corner that may actually work against our goals. So I just want to put that there. Thank you. Thanks, Mark.
Yeah, and this is the line right here where you will provide your proposal requested amount in accordance with the information provided in the funding tier information here. Below, you'll provide a description of your proposed project. As I said at the beginning, this is limited to 500 words, but please provide as much description as you think is necessary to sufficiently describe your project. Here, describe the community need for your project. If you've had conversations with some constituents about how the project is needed currently to fill a void, or if it's an ongoing project that you believe continues to be important, please describe that here. This question asks, is this a new, existing, or changed project? And by change, we mean an existing project that will be revised if the grant funds are approved. Here, who will benefit from this proposed project and how? Please describe specific groups or organizations or peoples that you know this project could benefit.
Can I say one more thing?
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Sorry, excuse me. I wanted to just give a little more clarity. Some of your organizations may have been, we're using this word throughout the pandemic, pivot. Some of you may have pivoted some of your services already because you recognize due to the pandemic, so maybe it was remote, maybe it was online, maybe it's just something you've done in terms of your service delivery, and you say, wow, this is actually working, or this has been a really needed addition to what we're doing. This gives you the ability to say, this is something we might have just started 6 months ago, and it's working so well, we want to expand it, we want to continue. So that's the idea, that maybe you've actually started it, but it's kind of recent, and in some cases, you started it in direct response to what the pandemic has changed as a community dynamic. So this will be an opportunity to recognize that, because it is going to be important in your answers that you tie in the pandemic connection. And and when you call us for technical assistance or whatever that might be, there are different ways we can explain. I'm looking at, for example, Deloitte's. I know you're on the call, Joff. So maybe in your case, it's been people couldn't come to your venue because of the pandemic. There were occupancy requirements, there were social distancing requirements. It's affected your fundraising. So the pandemic has had a number of very unique and many times unanticipated impacts. So be sure to talk about, for many of your agencies, the pandemic has resulted in additional calls for service. If you're in the mental health field, if you're providing food between the pandemic, supply chain, et cetera. So think about what is the tie-in that has impacted my agency, my organization, and the people that we're trying to serve, and make sure you reference that, because at the end of the day, these COVID-19 funds are to help us move forward from the COVID-19 pandemic. Sorry, Mark, thank you.
No, you're good. So I believe, yeah, we addressed this question. We're discussing who will benefit. Down here, give an approximation of how many individuals or families will be served. Similarly, ask how many of those will be served that are located within Greene County, Missouri. We understand that some of your organizations might serve individuals that live outside county lines. Just provide the closest approximation that you can. And here's something that Dr. Foster was just describing to see how these funds will help your project and your organization recover from COVID-19. Is there anything you want to address there? Perfect. Here's our.
I have a couple questions, if I can ask a question. I want to back up a little bit on the employees. Is that during the tax year, or is that during the time that you file the application on number of employees?
That should be for your tax year, please.
Okay, thank you very much. The second one is, we have the traveling wall, the Vietnam Wall comes. We pull in 30,000 people that come to that. We have not asked them which ones are Greene County and which ones are not, but you're saying we can use an estimate on that.
Yes, use an estimate, please. Thank you.
Thank you.
Perfect. Okay. This section is all about the American Rescue Plan Act utilization and the compliance with the eligible expenditure categories as outlined in the legislation. These are broad categories provided in the legislation. So you would simply provide yes or no if your project would respond in one of these three areas. Down below, we provide more specificity on the types of categories that your project might address. Many of these will be similar to the top priorities identified in the needs assessment report. If you do not see the specific category that you believe your project best fits in, we've provided the full compliance and reporting guidance, which would pull up all of these 66 expenditure categories outlined in the federal legislation. Likely you would find one that best suits your specific project's needs. And for an example, you would click, say, affordable housing if your project addresses that specific need, and then it would represent that here in this item here. Underneath, we ask to make sure that the funds that you receive will be used explicitly for the expenditures that you described, and then similarly, will it benefit the citizens of Greene County? Here is an important question about how you would use the funds to be used in accordance with ARPA eligible uses. Essentially, we're asking how, whenever you take in mind those 66 eligible expenditure categories, what steps will you take to make sure that you aren't stretching it beyond the federal legislation while still being true to your project's core intentions? This question is asking for the totality of your project cost. We understand that the project grant amount that you request might be just a proportion of your total project cost, so we'd like to see that figure represented here. Here we're asking if you've received any previous federal donations for this project, either through ARPA, CARES, or PPP. And then is this request for something that you budgeted for in your current budget year? For many of you, the project that you are proposing funding for might be something that you plan on envisioning as a long-term project. As this is a one-time grant, if I remember correctly, so this is a one-time grant, we want to see what steps your organization would take to continue to fund your project in the future. And down here, these are additional organization compliance questions to make sure that we're complying with all of the legislation and that your organization is doing everything correct there. And then service to underrepresented residents, this was something we discussed in the PowerPoint. The legislation has a strong equity component, and this will help us see how specifically your project will assist those individuals and communities that were disproportionately impacted by the pandemic. This second to last section is our supporting documentation. These are important to ensure that your organization is current on all information that it might need to have to be legally recognized and running. Whenever you click select a file to upload, it'll bring you to your File Explorer where you can attach a PDF or Word document or other accessible file type to this application. You would be able to attach it right there. We need all 6 of the first 6 supporting documents are required. Receipts for eligible project is an optional attached document if you are seeking reimbursement for an eligible expenditure project that was expensed from March 3rd, 2021 to now. And that will be in line with those eligible expenditure categories that were described previously in the application. Additional attachments, it is possible during the review process that any of the ARPA team members might come back and ask you for additional attachments that we might need to corroborate some fact about your organization or your project. If you want to attach those now, you can. Otherwise, we'll contact you in the review process asking specifically what type of form or information we might need. Once all of those are submitted there, it'll take you to your confirmation page where you will see all of the answers that you provided throughout the application. If you think something looks wrong, feel free to go back into the previous sections to clean up any mistakes. If you want to add something, if you see that you haven't hit your word count yet and feel like something is pertinent to the story of your project, feel free to go back and add that. Once you're done and you think that all of the information was completed to the best of your ability, you'd scroll down to the bottom. And this is information detailing how the information that you provided in the application is correct to the best of your ability. And these are agreements that you agree to. So we could read through those. And once you've read through all of those and understand the requirements of this grant program, you'll click Submit Application. That then goes into our admin portal where you can begin the review process.
Thank you, Mark. I might need you to come back and say something else, but I wanted to say, I know some of you on the call work with Angie Cruz, who I believe earlier, she probably still is on the call and Cindy Stein, the auditor's office. You may recall the experience of having to send in a lot of documentation as we were going through your application and ultimately in the grant agreement process. So one of the things we're trying to do, unlike with the CARES program as a learning experience, is to really get as much of your supporting documentation as part of the initial application. So when we get that application submitted, we have everything just about complete. As I referenced earlier, though, there may be a case where you are applying for support for a program that you started during the eligible time period and you've already had some expenses that were not reimbursed to any other program source. That would be an example of something you could also just, if you were funded, you could load back up and we would have. And so we're trying to minimize a lot of the continued follow-up for additional information. So we're hoping that that will actually be the reality. So I wanted to help you to understand. Also, I wanted to say, I know you might be feeling like this is a lot of information. Our advisory council and our internal ARPA team, our goal is to have this application not so intimidating that you don't want to complete it, but at the same time, it has to be thorough. So we've tried to find a healthy compromise, but please know that because these are federal funds, we actually have a lot of reporting requirements that we have to make on a quarterly and annual basis in terms of how we spend these funds as Greene County. So some of this is information that we need, but a lot of this is information that the federal government will be asking for us. So we'll have to be saying in our report, how many people did we serve? They'll ask us for approximate racial and ethnic breakdown. So this is why we're asking for a lot of that, so we can make our report as detailed as possible, because at the end of the day, the Greene County Commissioners are responsible for demonstrating how they have actually allocated almost $57 million of federal funds. So this is a serious task, and so I just need you to understand what that means. And I do see the questions. Do you know they have the editable? It should be, yeah, you can edit.
Yes, at least to answer your question, if you do save part of the section that you want to return later, you will be able to sign into the portal and continue your application. Once it's submitted, I do not believe there is a way to go back into the document, but if there's something that you believe you typed in incorrectly, feel free to contact us and we can make note of that in the back end.
And I see Michelle's question. That's actually a great question. I think that the first priority would be, how has COVID impacted the population that you're serving? But I would certainly weave in that, what have you found in terms of your organization? Because maybe that was staffing issues, Maybe there are things in terms of being able to adjust your hours and not being able to serve in the way you've had. And what was the impact of that? So as I referenced earlier, I know for many nonprofits, it certainly had a lot of cash flow issues in terms of having the funding for some of your special events and fundraisers, the typical ways that you have tried to keep solvent. So those are things that you want to think about as well, of course. But feel free to call us and talk about those specifics as well. Yeah, and I know we talked about this in the nonprofit listening sessions, and I think I have a United Way session as well. You can do a collaborative application, but and I know it's going to come in under a lead organization, but we'll be able to tell rather that this is a collaborative application. So we encourage that with the CIP. I don't think we got any collaborative applications, but that certainly is I think, a very unique and appropriate way to serve our community when a couple of agencies work together. So yeah, you'd have a lead organization, but just make it clear that this is a collaborative application, and we will be able to track that. Thank you. Good question, Melissa, in terms of the rolling basis. Our plan now, and they said the best laid plans of mice and men, but our plan is we will have all the applications come in during the 3-week application period. We will begin the review after the application period is ended. And then that will be the time when we'll allocate that $5.9 million into our 3 funding tiers. Currently, the Advisory Council is recommending, I use the word recommending, that we look at the tier 3 grants first, or grant applications first. So those will be the grants at the smaller grant request level, primarily because often these are the organizations that have some of the greatest challenges in terms of cash flow, and often are working with these very, I guess I would say, very necessary pockets that may be having, difficult challenges in our community. So that's the basis we'll be looking at them. Then you see the last question from Bob, the time frame. So that's 3 weeks starting today that the grant application is online. Then it will close at midnight, 3 weeks from today, and then we'll start the review process. We don't know how long the review process. We are expecting, at least anticipating at least 120 grant applications or more that we have to go through and categorize and code according to all of the ARPA. So obviously we'd like to start awarding some funds this fall, but I certainly don't want to be quoted today at how long that review process is going to take. Obviously, it's going to be a high priority for all of us.
And I believe that addresses the totality of the application. If there are any questions while you're filling out the application, you'll be able to reference the user guide that Skylar previously discussed. And we also have our contact information if you want to get immediately in touch with us while you're completing the application.
Okay. I don't want to pretend I didn't see another question. I think someone did ask, can they apply, submit more than one application? I'm just going to say today, to be candid, because there's a lot of you on the call, I think that's a tricky question. I think it's really depending on what the intent. I think our first concern is, are you trying to maybe work your way? I'm not saying about you, the person who asked the question, but in the case of an application like that, is the intent to work around the limit process by putting in multiple applications, and maybe somehow you end up getting more money? I think if I was answering that for you right now, I would say if you have several things you're trying to ask for, I would ask for it in the same application. And because we're still going to, I think, look at what is the total amount of grant award to this organization, and you're still going to be limited by that. I know that our commissioners have indicated if there is a case, and I would say this is a unique case, and I would be very careful about applying specifically this way. If you had some kind of a matching grant that was confirmed, or maybe there's a private donor that's writing you a check for $1 million, there may be an opportunity to have your ceiling waived in that case. Hopefully that's clear what I'm saying. So again, in the case, I think, for example, if you had state funds or maybe private funds, that could be a waiver perhaps in terms of the grant ceiling limit in those cases. I know we've covered a lot of information. We wanted to try to make this about an hour. So I really appreciate your patience and your attention. I want to remind you again, we're doing this workshop again next week. That's going to be on our Greene County ARPA tab. We also have the technical assistance hours available with our staff. You can also call. But we still got about another 5 or 6 minutes today. Can we just go to maybe the full screen, if you don't mind, and see if anybody else has any questions, if you're who's still with us. We certainly want to take any other questions, comments that you may have. Again, we want this to be an inviting application, but we have to get this information at the same time. Thank you, Michelle. Somebody said thank you. We appreciate that. Thank you. Thank you. Appreciate that. No questions. That means it's all your answers have been covered. But I really want to encourage you, when you go online, I know sometimes it feels different than just listening to us talk. Feel free to call in. Feel free to email, because I know some of you are grant warriors. You're working at night. Send us the emails. We'll answer in the morning when we get in. And we appreciate that. Again, this is recorded, so we will get this put up on the Greene County website as well under the ARPA tab. You guys are just so wonderful. That's what I love about Greene County and Springfield. Thank you guys. Again, thank you for all that you do. We appreciate you.
I do have one question, Dr. Foster.
Yes.
If you have, is there another opportunity for grant applications other than the nonprofit? For our entity, we're not a 501c, we're a Section 115 Missouri nonprofit. So is there another application round that will be out there?
We're not planning one, but can you email me? Yeah, we're not planning on. Our only other application period will be next year, the same nonprofit program. So just send me an email so I can understand what you're doing, please.
Okay. All right.
Thank you. All right. Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon. Have a safe evening. Appreciate it. Thank you.